Hey everyone, this is Todd Toven, the Rocky Mountain Meat Hunter, and today I'm going to talk to you about some of my favorite hunting knives. Okay, the first knife I want to talk to you about today is by Russel Green River Works. This is their camp knife. Russel Green River Works knives have been made in the U.S. since 1830. They pretty much were the standard knife that helped to settle the American West. They were used in trading, they were used by fur trappers, they were used by mountain men, by cowboys, and they're made in Massachusetts. They still are made there today. These blades, you can get blanks for 10 to 15 bucks or so. I purchased this one at the Mountain Man shop in Manitou Springs, Colorado. This has a 5-inch blade and it's around 9 inches overall length. Has full tang, fastened with 3 brass rivets. This happens to be a walnut handle. I've made my own handles for a lot of these using maple, using walnut. Basically just rivet the wood to each side, secure the rivets, and then use my orbital disc sander to sand these down to a nice fit on my hand. This is carbon steel. It is not stainless. These puppies do stain. It's a good old-fashioned looking knife blade. They are quite thin, and you can put an edge on them very quickly, and they actually hold an edge quite well, especially for a knife that's that thin. I've used this knife to field dress, to gut, to skin, probably somewhere in the vicinity of 8 to 12 elk, pronghorn, and mule deer here in Colorado over the last 10 years or so. Also use this knife a lot on my 1800s cowboy rig when I'm guiding Jeep tours up here in the Rockies. So I highly recommend Russel Green River Works knives. I keep this one in an old Native American style belt sheath. This one happens to be made by Montana Americana, and you can look them up on the internet. They actually make knives as well, but that's where I bought this sheath. Okay, the next knife is one that I made myself using a Frost Mora. That's a Mora of Sweden blade. That's a 4.5-inch blade, and this is with an Elk Antler Handle. I'll do a future video on how I make these, but it's a pretty simple and very rewarding process. Basically, just cut a piece of antler to length. The trick is, and what usually ends up taking most amount of the time, is finding a piece that feels really good, that looks really good, you know, like an actual handle. You want a good weight, something that feels good in the palm of your hand. So you cut it to length. I'll basically then drop this in a vise. I'll drill straight down into the elk antler to get the length that I need to put the tang of the knife in there. Now these knives here have sort of a rat tail tang, a lot like something you'd see on a file. Some of the blanks have thicker tang on them, some are full tang, like the Russel Green River Works we just looked at. So I glue it, I fill it with 24-hour epoxy. I don't touch it for 24 hours. I'll come back in and I'll solder in my knife guard that I put on there. This has laminated high carbon steel. I actually brushed it off with a wire brush to give it a more rugged look. Now I've used this, I take it as a secondary knife in my backpack, and I've used this as a second knife gutting out several elk over the last couple of years. I'll have 2 or 3 fixed handled knives I'll keep with me, and I'll just tear right through them. I might use one for one application, one for another, but again, I really like that knife. And that is, of course, Frost Mora of Sweden blade, and Mora has been making knife blades in Sweden since 1891. Here's the belt sheath that I keep that one in. I've also been known to have that on my side with my 1800s cowboy rig as well, because it looks great for reenactment. I also picked the Frost Mora blank up at the Mountain Man shop in Manitou Springs. Alright, the next knife is the only fixed blade hunting knife I have in my collection that I actually bought completely off the shelf, that I didn't make part of. And this is a buck knife. I bought this one at Cabela's, at the flagship Cabela's store up in Sidney, Nebraska, about 12 years ago. I bought this for around $65. Back then, the prices have gone up on these right now. I think they're retailing for around $105, although you can still get them from some retailers and get them on eBay used, and sometimes even new, a lot cheaper than $105. I believe that Buck is calling this the Buck Zipper right now. This has a 4 1/4 inch blade. This particular one is not serrated. They make this in a serrated version. I bought the one with the gut hook, which I use a lot for zipping the skin down, for gutting it out. It's made out of 420 stainless steel. It has a texturized black rubber handle that feels great in your hand. This thing will never fall out, even if your hand was soaking wet, even if your hand was coated in vegetable oil. That thing is not going anywhere. It has brass bolster and guard on there. And it's just a great knife, and again, I'll frequently take that along with me and use that as one of my main knives for mule deer, pronghorn, and of course elk here in the Rockies. It comes with a great nylon belt sheath and a really nice snap. Has a good plastic insert that prevents the knife from poking all the way through. Now, buck knives, of course, have been made in the USA since 1902, but I do know that about 10 years ago or so, buck knife started to do production in China. So I can't speak to the quality anymore of the Chinese knives, if they're good or bad. I do know this particular one was made towards the end of the USA runs, and again, it's a great knife, so buy one of these used on eBay if you're looking for a hunting knife, and you're good to go. Alright, the next knife I'm going to show you is a small lock blade. And yes, you heard me right, I called it a lock blade. That is what we call these knives growing up. When I became an adult, I realized that people in other parts of the country called them lockbacks, but we were weirdos, I guess, growing up in Pennsylvania, and call these things lock blades. This is the Buck 112 Ranger. This has a 3-inch blade and about a 4 1/4 inch handle. This particular one was made in 1988, so 25 years ago. My dad actually used this for a long time as one of his main knives. He wore it on his belt for a lot of years. I have used it for the last 15 years or so. I've used it to gut out lots of trout, and I take it hunting with me. I'll use it as an extra knife on my side or in my pack. I have even pulled it out from time to time, and I've used it with help in deboning the meat from the elk. I also wear this on my belt when I'm doing guided hikes and zipline tours on Pikes Peak for adventures out west. So it's a great knife, the Buck 112 Ranger. Okay, the next knife I'm going to show you is the Schrade Old Timer Lockback, lock blade. And it's a funny story how I got this one. I was on one trip in particular, and I forgot my Buck 112. Got a little paranoid, so I pulled into a Walmart in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and picked up the Schrade Old Timer for about 20 bucks or so, and absolutely love it. I would later, of course, find my buck knife, but very glad that I had to purchase this thing out of necessity. You know, Schrade has been making knives since 1904 in the U.S., although also in the last decade, Schrade has ceased production, like a lot of American knife makers. Schrade sold their name to Taylor Brands who also purchased the name Smith & Wesson, so they make Schrade and Smith & Wesson knives now. I can't speak to the quality of those, but the reviews I've seen online are bad quality. This, once again, was made towards the end of the U.S. production of these. This has a 3.5-inch blade and a 4.5-inch handle. I forgot to show you the lock on the buck, but the same thing here. It is crisp. Absolutely no play in the blade. Made out of stainless steel. This has what's called a Delrin handle. It's a crystalline plastic that's used for industrial applications. This particular one has a bone looking pattern to it. And I have also carried this on many hunting trips, and I have used this in conjunction with fixed blade knives on many, probably at least 5 or 6 elk field dressing and deboning situations. Absolutely love this knife. The Schrade Old Timer USA production, not the current Chinese stuff that's not even made by Schrade. The same sheath that I purchased for it originally. Okay, so to recap on these knives, the first one, Russel Green River Works, oldest knife maker in the US. Knife of the American mountain man, the camp knife. Love it. Second one, a Frost Mora blade with Elk Antler, Mora of Sweden. The Buck Zipper Buck Knife, American made, somewhat modern style, great knife. And then my 2 standby lock blade lockbacks, the Buck 112 Ranger and the Schrade Old Timer. Thanks for watching the video today. I appreciate you blessing me, and until next time, praise the Lord and pass the elk.